I think the best place for us to start is back in November. And I want to ask, what was going through your head the morning after the election when you realized not only did you win, but that the DFL had secured a trifecta?
Yeah, and I found out about 3:30 in the morning. You know, you're kind of up late, and I got a text from Speaker Hortman, and at the time who said it looks like we're going to add the Senate to this. I think the biggest thing for Minnesota is that there was work that was unfinished. I think one of the frustrations is ideologically, you know, some of the big issues that come up, we have to deal with it, reproductive care and that. But I think the frustrations were we were sitting on a $12 billion surplus last May. We had a deal, and then politics, you know, folks walked away from the deal. I think the biggest thing I thought of was, and the first thing I said to leaders was, I said, we have a responsibility to finish things on time. We came out of the chute and did $100 million in tax conformity. That should have been done last year, just clearing up some of these things. So, and then I thought, what could have been possible? Making school meals available to folks. Trying to make sure that we improve our infrastructure, make sure we take advantage of the federal dollars that were coming in. So I just thought the possibilities of what we could do as a state probably increased because we reduced some of the political gridlock.
Back in January, the DFL put forward their legislative priorities at the beginning of that session, trying to get a lot accomplished, and they have a full list of those things that they put out. Do you feel like you guys have done a good job addressing those priorities, and do you think that there's still some more work that needs to be done to achieve some of these?
Yeah, well, I ran on these things. My priority was to make Minnesota the best state to raise children and to have a family. That means making sure that things are affordable, housing's affordable, making sure our education system's one of the best in the country, making sure you're connected with broadband, and making sure that you have the ability to be able to either start a business or work in the profession that you want to, making sure that we continue to invest in those things. We also said we were going to make sure that Minnesota's a place where freedom for your individual healthcare choices are going to be yours, and that we start thinking about how do we look to the future to tackle climate change while creating good new jobs. You know, and being this week out in Cummins and watching the Cummins folks in Fridley talk about they're going to take advantage of this, creating hundreds of new jobs in a way that we're going to use clean hydrogen. So I think for me, the priorities were to make sure we were delivering on those promises, whether it was protecting reproductive rights, leaning into a clean energy future, all the while making sure that middle class folks saw a reduction in their costs, saw childcare be more affordable, saw schools being invested in, and making sure that we were taking advantage of the federal dollars. Minnesota is one of the states that receives the least amount of federal dollars. We are a payer state, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to invest those dollars back into Minnesota, especially in infrastructure.
Let's talk about the joint budget targets real quick, because that's a pretty big deal. To my knowledge, it's pretty early on in the session to actually have budget targets, let alone joint budget targets. How big of a deal is that for you guys? It's
a big deal. I think for, you know, your viewers are out there listening, is as we negotiate, Democrats and Republicans last year, this year, it's you know, Democrats negotiating, but taking input. One of the things is we have a set target. I've got the balanced budget. That's what we've done over the last few years. We can't run a deficit. With that being said, then we come up with where it is. Everybody has a different idea of where they should spend that money. We've agreed upon targets inside of that, and now the legislative process will work. Democracy will work. Groups are coming up here and saying we need more money for nursing homes. We need more money for child care. We need more money for tax cuts for folks. Now, inside those budget targets, they will work those out and finish the first week of May with those. We will try and conference them together, and then my goal is we'll finish on time. And so what Minnesotans can expect out of this, I think it gets lost in some of the messaging. You will see the biggest tax cut in state history will come out of this. I think you will see the largest investment in education. Now, the exact places where those go, that's still up for negotiation.
I want to talk about the GOP.
Yeah.
Because one of their criticisms about this big budget surplus is that it should be going back to Minnesotans, and they want to see more tax cuts. Yeah. What do you say to that?
Well, it is going back to Minnesotans. The one thing I will just very clearly say to the GOP, we negotiated a deal together, and they chose to walk away for political reasons. They're very clear. They weren't cagey about it. They said, we're going to win all three, and we're going to do it our way, so we're rejecting this deal. I've come back to them again with basically the same thing. There are billions of dollars of tax cuts in this. Their frustrations is, I'm not going to give tax cuts to the wealthiest Minnesotans because they don't need them. They're doing quite well, and they find ways that they don't have to pay at the same rate. With that being said, Minnesotans are going to see direct checks coming back. They're going to see tax cuts in Social Security. They're going to see child tax cuts. They're going to see their property tax go down, or they should, because we're going to invest in local communities through local government aid, through aid to education, to roads. So people say, We want to see this money come back. You're going to see it come back. Roads, bridges, broadband, schools, checks to you, reduced costs. They're very, very specific about this. They want tax cuts for the wealthiest Minnesotans. So there's just a difference of where the money goes. What I can tell them is, you're going to see, and I just tell Minnesotans this, it's going to be data-wise provable, the largest tax cut in Minnesota history. But the one thing that they're asking for, and a lot of things, is we have to be very careful about ongoing spending as much as ongoing cuts, because we have to balance budget. This is an anomaly at this time coming out of COVID, this large surplus. For those who say, we shouldn't be running surpluses, that either means that we're overtaxing people or not investing. I agree with them on that. But I think what I've said is let's use this as one-time money. A lot of this is one-time money. Let's do some of these cuts, and then let's reevaluate and see what happens. Because with the banking issues, with Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, there's still a lot of unknowns. So Republicans are asking to go cut all these cuts, and then what happens into the future. I think what we're saying, and the Democrats in the House and Senate are saying, is we're going to target our tax cuts to the middle class and reducing costs for them, and then we're going to reevaluate next year.
So on the note of tax cuts, I want to talk about your initial budget proposal of, I think it was $8 billion, if I'm not mistaken. In the joint budget targets, that number was $3 billion. Where did those discussions go? How did you guys settle on that much lower number of $3 billion?
Well, and it's no secret on this, and I'm glad that they came around. There's some kind of strange bedfellows now here. Republicans who are convinced my idea to send checks back to people, which I feel strongly about still, they said it was a gimmick. Now they think it's the number, we should do that. Democrats in the House aren't as enthusiastic about that. And I said, well, let's talk and feel where we're at. I feel very strongly that we need to put money back in people's pockets. I feel very strongly that there are people who can see a tax cut in Social Security that need it without the top richest folks having to see that. And we had to come to a compromise. That's what you mentioned at the top of this interview. Joint agreed targets are hard to get to because all sides have already compromised. Now we just need to decide where those go. And I think it's...
Do you think that's enough money for?
We'll see. Yes, I think it might be enough that we're able to get done, but I feel very adamant that, again, a big chunk of this, about a third of it, is going back in the forms of tax cuts directly back to people. The rest is going to infrastructure, education, and those types of things.
Could we see some Social Security tax relief? Because I know that's been a big point of contention.
We will.
Okay.
And like I've compromised with them and said that when I first came to office in 2019, we cut the Social Security tax. I didn't get a lot of enthusiastic help from either side at that time, but we were able to get that done. I think Democrats have always made the case that we want to make sure that working class and those folks that depend on this, keep in mind what we're going to do is we exempt right now right about 50% of all Minnesotans pay no tax at all on Social Security, and then it starts to slowly go up. There's proposals that I think what you'll see is that 50% will go up. It's not going to go to 100% because, again, if you're talking about the 100%, these are people that could be making $50 million a year. That Social Security money goes back into things that improve seniors' lives. It's why groups like AARP aren't supportive of the full tax repeal on Social Security.
So to be clear, you don't think we'll see a total repeal of the Social Security
No, I don't think
tax?
you'll see a total repeal. I don't think one makes sense and it's very expensive, but I think you'll see the vast majority of Minnesotans be exempted.
Okay. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about the progress that's been made in this session so far. There's things that have been passed, things that come to mind recently, the driver's licenses for all, the free school lunches, signing an executive order to make Minnesota a sanctuary state for gender affirming care. Compared to the rest of the union and what you're seeing right now, do you feel like the legislation being pushed forward in Minnesota is setting the state apart?
No, I think it's setting where Minnesotans are at. I made it very clear on this. The vast majority of Minnesotans support reproductive rights. The vast majority of folks know, and like I lived in southern Minnesota, I ran on this idea of driver's licenses for all back in 2006. Fact of the matter is, states who do this see a reduction of about 9% in hit and run accidents. It has nothing to do with immigration reform. It's been meant to be a divisive factor. $100 million in tax cuts that we did with tax conformity. These are things that people want. And I, for the life of me, don't understand why demonize these children for their gender identity. Their folks and their families are dealing with this. I trust people and their healthcare professionals to make these decisions, whether it's on reproductive care. And then, to be quite honest, things that want to be made to be divisive are not that much. I'll just say this, as a long, lifelong gun owner, background checks are supported by 90% of Minnesotans. So no, I think that these are things that Minnesotans wanted to see us get done. I think there's folks, again, who disagree with that. Let me be very clear that had I not won and had Republicans won, we would have banned abortion even in the case of rape and incest. That's what my opponent said. We would be demonizing children. Apparently, we would be banning books in some cases. So no, I think these are the things that Minnesotans asked to bring us together.
Yeah. I think some of that legislation that's being put forward has put Minnesota in a unique spot, especially compared to the rest of the union. You know, you see laws in even our neighbors, Iowa, South Dakota,
Yeah.
Florida, banning things like gender-affirming care.
Yeah.
I brought this printout of an article with me,
Yeah.
and it's an article from the Daily Beast.
Yep.
It says, Governor Walz is the anti-DeSantis. What do you say to that sentiment?
Well, I don't know about that. I served with Governor DeSantis in Congress. We obviously disagree. If there's an anti-piece of this, yeah, I think what much of the governor's doing is bullying people who don't have a voice, going after transgender people. People who say they're a small percentage of the population, yes, that's absolutely true, but they have every right that we have. So why demonize them? What is it hurting you in some of this? And this idea of taking books, or I'll just have to be candid with this, I think where I am the anti-DeSantis is very anti-business. You heard the Disney executives yesterday say that Florida is becoming anti-business. Minnesota is not anti-business. We listen to our business community. We're trying to create workforce. So my point is, I'm not trying to pick a fight with Ron on this, but I am going to say as a teacher and a parent that I'm going to stand up to bullies more. And I think the state of Minnesota is making that case that, look, you come here, you can live the life the way you want to. The irony for me is on this, nothing they're doing in Florida is about freedom. They're telling women about their reproductive rights. They're telling what you can and cannot read. They're going into colleges and telling them what they could teach. I trust people. I mean, I taught kids for years, conservative and liberal kids. My job wasn't to influence their way of thinking. My job was to present critical thinking opportunities for them. So I'm going to keep pushing back. So,
would you ever consider, let me ask you this, a run for a higher office?
Oh, I'm busy with this one right now. And what I say is my wife always has a saying that her mom said, and I like this one, is do the job that's in front of you. And I think that's the biggest thing, that if you start thinking about other things or if you start being distracted, do the job in front of you. And I tell our team, you have to have an aspirational vision, but you've got to have measurable milestones how you're going to get there. And over the next 4 weeks, we think we've got measurable milestones to reduce childhood poverty, to increase access to health care, to make Minnesota's economy stronger, and to reduce the cost of living for most Minnesotans. And so that's the job in front of me.
So what I'm hearing is it's not a no, it's just you're focused on Minnesota.
Just do the job right now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think that's all the questions I have for you, Governor. Thanks again for making this happen. And you got anything you want to say to the people of greater Minnesota?
No, just grateful. I think you're going to see some real investments, from broadband to these transportation dollars. But I think the biggest thing is you take a look now is Minnesota's place as growth in terms of some startup jobs with the president's visit around green energy. This is a transformational time. States that are choosing to go towards where the future's lying, I think stand to do much better. So I think Minnesotans, especially in greater Minnesota, huge opportunities.